Hello and welcome back to the channel, and I am here for sort of a discussion video for you guys. This is a type of video that I've kind of wanted to make for a little bit now, so I figured why not do it. So for this video, we're going to be talking about last year's lineup of music 2019. Now, you guys know that I've been giving last year a lot of credit for its incredible lineup of music, but I can't help but, give it the credit that I've been giving it for how much great music came out that year. But before I do dive into this, I would like to give out some shout outs. Now, I know it's been a while since I've given out shout outs on this channel, but I realized that I have had a few newcomers to the channel. So yeah, those shout outs, well, I got two shout outs. The first one goes to Big Face TV. This is a really cool guy. He's, I think, fairly new to YouTube, and he seems to know what he's talking about music-wise, and his reviews are interesting, and he seems very knowledgeable enough when it comes to music, so definitely check out his content. So Big Face TV. And the other person I want to give a shout out to is Andrew Bibe. I think I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. He's commented on my videos a few times. He's fairly new to the channel as well. He does like skits and stuff on his channel, which is, well, of course, up my alley for those who know me well enough. And also like album unboxing videos, at least from what I've seen. But yeah, some interesting videos like that. So definitely check out Andrew's channel as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into this discussion video on why or how 2019 ended up being the best year for music of the 2010s. So yeah, there's definitely a lot I want to talk about here. So yeah, now first of all, it's because of all the great bands that have released music that year. I mean, there's just been so much by many great bands that came out that year. And it was also a really good year for comeback albums as well. I mean, I can think of 3 comeback albums last year. I mean, one of them is pretty obvious, of course, but we'll get into all that. So yeah, I do want to talk about some of the great albums in general that just came out that year. Of course, Dream Theater with their album Distance Over Time. And I think that this is Dream Theater's best album probably since either Octavarium or Black Clouds and Silver Linings, but I would say Octavarium. But yeah, Distance Over Time is definitely Dream Theater's best album in a while. If this is an album that you've passed up as far as a 2019 release, definitely give it a listen. You won't be disappointed. If you like progressive metal, if you like any kind of progressive music, definitely check out Dream Theater's latest album. It's definitely one of the best progressive metal albums of last year. And of course, speaking of progressive metal, we got The Verdict by Queensryche, which is just an awesome album. I mean, still to this day, my favorite album of last year. This album is just amazing due to its amazing guitar work and the vocal melodies that you get with it, and just it's easily the best Queensryche album with Todd LaTorre on vocals, and I think it's their best album since Promised Land. Yeah, it's definitely a great album though, especially considering tracks like Man the Machine, Light Years, and Bent. I mean, these are some fantastic tracks. I mean, those are some great starting points if you're wanting some, I guess, samplers for this album. But yeah, it's a fantastic album, man. I mean, there's just no going wrong with it. Yeah, I love The Verdict. It's definitely one of the best albums of last year, and in my opinion, it is the best. But yeah, of course, you also got who else? Killswitch Engage come out with an album. Like, of course, their album Atonement, which I think is the best album of the current era with Jesse Leach. I know that's a rather unpopular opinion. I think a lot of people still do say that Disarm the Descent is still the best of the current era with Jesse, but I don't know. Atonement just does a whole lot for me. Really, my only complaint with the album, the only thing that I can really see wrong with that album is it's just a little short, and especially considering that there's some songs on the album that are only a little over 2 minutes or something like that. Some really short songs on that album, but for what the album is, it's a really good album. You know, it's not an album I put like in the top 3 of last year or anything, but I still think it's a really good album, and I think it's one of Killswitch Engage's best, to be honest. So Atonement by Killswitch Engage, I mean, it's a great album. You of course had Howard Jones come back to feature on one of the songs, The Signal Fire, of course. But yeah, really great song, and just a really great album in general. Definitely check out this album if you like metalcore or anything like that. I know this is kind of, you know, looking like a end of the year list part 2 for 2019, but, you know, I'm just kind of going over, kind of doing an overview video, I guess, like just telling you my thoughts and why last year was the best year for music of the decade. So yeah, Killswitch Engage's newest album is really good, and you did have some bumps in the road too. That's not to say that, you know, there hasn't been any, you know, that's not to say that, you know, last year didn't have any flaws, because I would say it did, especially, you know, when it comes to bands like Soilwork, In Flames, and Leprous. Now, all those bands' newest albums are not bad, but they're nothing I could say are fantastic either. I mean, Soilwork's latest album, you know, I don't mind the album, and it's a technically good album, but I don't know, it just doesn't stand up compared to some of the stuff that they've released before, I think. Same could be said about In Flames, of course. Now, In Flames, a lot of you know, is my favorite Melodeath band of all time, and the band isn't even Melodeath anymore, but yeah, this, their newest album, I mean, yeah, it's definitely not one of their best. I do wish that this band would go back to the days of the Jester Race, but that's most likely never going to happen. And with Leprous's newest album, this album, again, not terrible, but just, I don't know, I'd much rather listen to the few albums that came before it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just doesn't really do a whole lot. So yeah, those albums, I can't say were terrible, but they were just kind of mediocre in a sense. Like, just kind of like meh albums. Like, you listen to them and you think, yeah, this is good, but it's nothing mind-blowing, of course. And of course, you did have some albums by some bands that are just some of their worst material, such as Starset. I think Starset released their worst album last year. Of course, The Visions was one of the worst albums that I've ever heard of last year. And then, of course, The Devil Wears Prada's latest album, which is probably my least favorite album that I've heard last year. I mean, it's that bad. I mean, so yeah, you did definitely got some bands' weakest material last year. Now, The Devil Wears Prada, you could just say that that's just me not being a fan of this band like I used to be. That might be part of it, but even looking at their newest album objectively, it's really uninteresting. The Devil Wears Prada, in my opinion, has not really had a good album in a really long time. I would say either 818 or Dead Throne. But yeah. And the deal with Starset, I kind of like Starset, but I'm not what you call super crazy about them. Like, I just, you know, can only tolerate a few songs these days. But yeah, I still do like some of their songs. You know, I'll still go back and listen to some of the Starset songs and all this and that. But if I do that, it's going to be something from one of their first 2 albums, because this newest album, Divisions, is easily their weakest. I mean, it's not a very good album at all. And yeah, like I said, it's one of the worst albums that I've heard last year. Now, I can't say that the album is atrociously bad. It's just, you know, because I think there's still a couple good songs on it, but for the most part, it's just not a very good album. So yeah, there has been some bumps in the road when it came to music in 2019, you know, with rock and metal, of course. But yeah, and like I said before, last year I thought was also a terrific year for comeback albums. Of course, you know, we got to mention Slipknot. I mean, Slipknot came out with well, you could make a debate on whether or not they had a comeback, since they've never really been on a hiatus or anything. You know how Slipknot is. They usually like to release an album like, gaps in between others, of course. You also had As I Lay Dying come back with their first album since 2012, of course. So it has been a while since their last album. And I think As I Lay Dying's newest album, Shaped by Fire, is actually their best album since An Ocean Between Us. I mean, that's how good the album is, I think. And then, of course, you had the obvious Fear Inoculum by Tool. I mean, that's easily what I think most people think of when they think of, the comeback album of last year, since it's been such a long time since the last Tool album. And I do think Fear Inoculum is actually a little bit better than 10,000 Days. I mean, Tool has never released a bad album, but if you are curious to know how I would rank the Tool discography, I did do a ranking video for this band, so definitely go back and watch that if you haven't seen that yet. So yeah, it's been a great year for comeback albums. Plus, we can't forget that we had, basically a double album by Demon Hunter come out earlier last year. War and Peace, of course. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say War and Peace are some of the band's best work. I surely don't think that at all. But they're good albums, and I don't mind them, And I actually think that they do have some of the best songs that Demon Hunter has ever written. Lesser Gods especially. I mean, that song is just absolutely fantastic. Easily my favorite song, at least for the War album. But yeah, War and Peace. Demon Hunter did show that they could come out with an album that's better than their last album, Outlive, but that's not to say that these albums are some of their best work. I still, put albums like The Triptych and The Extremist really high up there, But War and Peace are still really good, though. They're still good albums, in their own right. So yeah, with all this new music, with all these comeback albums, 2019, I mean, that's why I think it's the best year for music of the 2010s. And the few years before that were still really good, I thought 2018 was a good year for music. Of course, you had Breaking Benjamin, 3 Days Grace, Seven Dust, Judas Priest especially, Alice in Chains, who else? All That Remains, and a few others, of course. But yeah, 2018 has been pretty solid too, but nowhere near as solid as 2019. 2017, we did have Trivium's album, The Sin and the Sentence, come out that year, which is a really good album, of course, but other than that album, there wasn't really much to be hyped over that year. 2015, I thought was really good. Same with 2016. 2016, I thought actually was a really good year if you were a metalhead, especially. You had Megadeth, Meshuggah, who else? Metallica, of course, with their comeback album and things like that. But yeah, so it is interesting to look back at the last few years of the past decade to see, which year was the best. And for me, it's 2019. Now, if I were to name any critique with 2019, now, even though, like I said, I give it much credit for all the great music that it had to offer, I do have to critique 2019 for one thing, and it's the lack of new albums by classic bands. Bands like Iron Maiden, Metallica, but you wouldn't expect them to come out with new music in 2019, of course. Of course, rumor has it that Iron Maiden is actually coming out with a new album this year in 2020, which is, I mean, really mind-blowing. I'm really stoked for that album, and yeah, so the lack of classic bands is one critique I got to give to 2019. Now, of course, there was Queensryche. You know, you had Queensryche come out with an album that year, which was actually their best album in a while, so there was that. And yes, you could make the argument that Dream Theater's also a classic heavy metal band. Same with Tool, to an extent. But you get the idea. But yeah, I'm definitely, I was definitely satisfied with last year's lineup of music. And I personally don't think this year, 2020, will have any competition in comparison to 2019. I just don't see how that's possible, especially with everything that we had last year. You know, with all, you know, I even thought this, you know, towards the end of last year, like with all this new music that we got, all these comeback albums, some bands, I think we got some of their best material, of course, like Killswitch Engage and As I Lay Dying, and even Queensryche. You know, with all that in mind, you just think, how could 2020 top 2019? You know, what is there to look forward to in 2020? Now, of course, you know, we had the acoustic Breaking Benjamin album, Aurora, which is not really a new album per se, but it was something, you know. And I do think that 2020 will still be a really good year for music, but I don't think it'll have competition in comparison to last year, if I'm being perfectly honest. But yeah, that's pretty much my video, guys. That's my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think. What is your favorite year of music of the past decade? For me, it would have to be 2019, just last year. Do you agree that 2019 was the best of last year, considering everything that we got? I mean, if you think about it this way too, last year is when we got the new Tool album. You know that, you know, you're in for a good year when you get a new Tool album, since, you know, it's been so long since the last one. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. What's your favorite year for music of the 2010s? Feel free to let me know in the comments. So with that being said, thanks for watching, have a nice day, and take care.